My full name is Stanley H. Tevis III, and I go by Jack. Jack's a pure nickname. I was born and raised in Westminster and grew up here. I'm 67 years old, and I was away from here for about 10 years for school, Army school, graduate school, and one thing or another, and then came back into the area probably age 30, maybe a little, yeah, about age 29, age 29. So I've been around Westminster a good part of my life, and been interesting to see it change over those 67 years. I was born in Baltimore because we didn't have a hospital in Carroll County in 1948, and my mother wanted to have I have a twin sister, she wanted to have her babies in a hospital setting, so Union Memorial Hospital. Since my father started living in Carroll County, I guess when he and my mom got married in 1942. So, so I was essentially born here. I attended school, Carroll County Public Schools, and then final 3 years of high school, went to school in Baltimore, and then for college, went to college at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. Then I have trained as a dentist, actually, and went to dental school at University of Maryland Dental School, graduated in 1977. Growing up in Carroll County, I have had two sisters. One has since passed away, and my parents, and we lived right 3 blocks from here at the corner of Bond and Green Street, 20 Bond Street. So I grew up, and in those days, in the 50s, Westminster was a town of probably, I don't know the exact number, it felt very small, and I assume it was about 3,000 people. And I had the run of the town from about age 6. As long as I was home for dinner by 6 o'clock, I had my bike, and that was first grade, and as long as I was home for dinner, boy, you had the run of the town. In those days, it was just, you grew up in the village. So it was a different time, and like a lot of small town USA, where you knew your neighbors, and your friends' parents were part of your parenting as well. Spent a lot of time at each other's houses, and it was a great place to grow up. Maybe you'd like to hear a little bit about the founding of the business. It really was founded by my grandfather in 1932, and he was middle-aged then. He had lost his job in Philadelphia during the Depression, and found this. It was a Gulf Oil commissioned agency, and my grandmother would never move to Westminster, and so they continued to live in Philadelphia from 1932 until 1939, and my grandfather commuted here from Philadelphia on Sundays or Monday mornings, and would go back to Philadelphia on Friday nights. My father joined him then. He was out of college in 1932. 1933, he joined my grandfather, and he also did that commute from Philadelphia on Sundays or Mondays and going back on Fridays, and just because my grandmother would not move here. Finally, she relented, and she said she would move to Baltimore. And so my grandparents rented a house on Brightside Avenue in Pikesville, and on this side of Baltimore. And then my grandfather commuted from Pikesville to Westminster, as did my father, until he met my mother, and they were married in 1942. My parents then got their own place on Main Street, 189 East Main Street, rented an apartment, 1942. Then my father was off the war in the South Pacific, until the end of 1945. And so anyway, my grandfather then ran the business. Essentially, it was since he was middle-aged in 1932, he essentially wanted to retire. And once my father joined him in 1933, it was really my father's energy that sustained the business in the 30s. But then during the war, when he was away, World War II, my grandfather had to step back up and get more involved. It was a company then of three or four folks altogether, plus my father and grandfather. During World War II, so my grandfather wanted to still spend time in Florida during the winter. And here, this is a heating oil business, and my father was off the war, my grandfather was back in charge, and he really wanted to be retired, I think. So he would go to Florida for 3 weeks during the worst part of the winter, and the 3 employees or 4 employees who were left, they were the ones sort of in charge. And then my father came back, like I say, from World War II. Yeah. So then during the 50s, late 40s and 50s, the business developed, and through the 60s. And I think my father essentially wanted to sort of be semi-retired by the time the late 60s came. Unfortunately, he passed away then in 1974 at age 65. By today's standards, relatively young. And at that point, that started a different era for the company. In 1974, we were about 15 employees, 13, 14, 15, and I don't have any brothers. And not that my sisters couldn't have been involved, but they weren't. I had worked here for 1 year prior to my father's passing, but I was headed off to dental school, and so in the fall of '73, before he passed away, I started dental school. He passed away April of '74. I'd been in school for less than a year, decided that I would finish, so that was 3 more years, and there was a general manager here by the name of Bob Peterson, who essentially happily and successfully ran the business until about 1983. He retired, and I worked partially in the business and partially as a dentist through until about 1980. And then worked full-time in the business starting in 1980 or so. You ask about how the business, the different aspects of the business and how the business has changed. We were first very blessed to be in Carroll County and in Westminster, and even though the area that we serve has grown beyond Carroll County, this really is a great community in which to have a business. Carroll County has just a great community of people, and generally is supportive of business. And so the company in the 70s, during my father's era, was a series of some Gulf gas stations and a heating oil business. And in the 80s and 90s, we branched out into some convenience stores. Modern Comfort Systems was founded by an employee of the company, who is still an employee of the company and is chairman of our advisory board, Nevin Haynes. Founded Modern Comfort Systems in 1980, and we moved into what was then our new facility in 1987 out at the air park. And that was and continues to be an HVAC company, meaning heating and air conditioning company, serving primarily residential homes, some commercial as well, but residential. So that was a business that was started in 1980. Convenience stores, we started that in 1981, and then we were in the insulation business from about 1977 till 1988. We sold that business in 1988. Installing insulation in new and existing homes. And then the propane division got started about 1999, 2000 or so, and that's the part of our business that's located in Hampstead, and that has grown well over the last 15 years. Again, Carroll County is just a great community in which to have a business. It's a very supportive environment, and good place to do business. Good folks. We've been blessed to have great employees as well. Carroll County has provided us many great employees, and who have been really primarily responsible for the growth of the business over the years. And We have many long-serving employees who have been with us 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. Nevin Haynes has been with us since 1964, so he's in his 52nd year. He started his 52nd year this past February 3rd. Yeah, which is amazing, just amazing. Yeah. But each of the businesses that we've started, not all have been successful, but we're particularly pleased with the success of the 4 convenience stores that we operate. That's the Jiffy Mart chain. And the one that was built out by the air park is, all of them have been very good. That's been particularly successful. Very pleased with that operation. So many businesses have consolidated. You see that in the car industry, you see it in the insurance business, you see it in many distribution businesses where there's consolidation going on. That's also happened in the heating oil business. So we've been successful in being able to grow the heating oil business that we're in and our territory, our geography, by acquiring several other heating oil businesses. One in '96, Wilhelm Energy in Randallstown. One in 2000, Walsh Fuel and Supply in Hampstead. And most recently in 2014, a company by the name of Rittenhouse, which is located in Parkville. In 2011, we acquired the heating oil part of Eagle Oil. So the opportunity for growth through acquisition of other heating oil companies has been something we've been particularly pleased about. And today we serve nearly 13,000 heating oil customers in Carroll County, Baltimore County, Frederick County, Harford County, Baltimore, and Pennsylvania, which is and operate a fleet of probably about 25 heating oil trucks. So pleased with the growth of that business and how well it's gone. But I could speak to each of the businesses that we're in. That we're pleased with Modern Comfort. That's probably 55 or 60 employees, and that do mainly heating and air conditioning services to residential customers in that same footprint that I just mentioned, those counties in southern Pennsylvania. The propane business is growing and had some years double-digit growth rates in both numbers of customers that we serve and the number of the amount of propane that we distribute. And for just being in business 15 years, that business has, we're very pleased with its progress. So we're blessed. We're just couldn't be more pleased with the way these businesses are going and growing and serving our community. Hey Tim, Jack here. Got your message. I'm free to talk. So over the last 10 or 15 years, there are so many great institutions, nonprofits in particular, in our county, in our community, that serve our 175,000 citizens. And once 2 years ago, I mentioned that in a public forum, and the list just went on, and it starts with a hospital, and it starts with the 2 great institutions of learning we have that are bookends of our county, Carroll Community College on one side, McDaniel College on the other. That you've been able to get an inside view of both, and they're great. But boy, it's, you know, the Y, the hospital, the Arts Council. You look at the 4-H programs, you look at the recreational programs for kids, you look at, I think there's 139 churches or something like that in Carroll County, and the amount of volunteers that serve all these organizations, and and not to mention boards of directors and trustees of nonprofits like Target and Change and Flying Colors of Success, and it's very gratifying to live in a community where the volunteerism is so strong. The fire departments, I think we've got 13 fire departments in Carroll County that are essentially run by volunteers. The list is probably another twice as long as I've already said, or 3 times, of these nonprofits and volunteer organizations that so many of our citizens give their time to, and essentially enrich the fabric of the community because of these things that are available to the community citizens. For me in particular, I've had a chance to serve as a volunteer at the hospital, and Carroll Hospital Center is just a great organization as far as the quality of health care that it provides to the community. It has won awards, and it's certainly that across the country they measure the quality component of every hospital, and our hospital consistently ranks in the top 5% of care given to patients in rankings, which is pretty dramatic for a relatively small community as we are, for its local community primary hospital to be ranked so high and doing so well. So again, I've served on its foundation board. I've also served on the hospital board itself, and got a good inside view of the workings of the hospital, and have participated in, as a volunteer, in some of the fundraising campaigns they've had over the past 20 years. And it's been very gratifying in 2 ways. One, to see the funds that are raised and the good purposes that it goes to, but also to see the largesse of community members who've contributed so much in both money, but also in volunteer time at the hospital. At times they've had more than 500 people as members of their auxiliary, men and women, who volunteer out at the hospital with their time and energy serving their fellow citizens. So anyway, it's pretty cool, and that's just one institution. The Arts Council, my mother and I had a sister who was interested in art, and my mother was very supportive of the Arts Council, and Carroll County Arts Council has just done great. It's on Main Street, the old Carroll Theater building, and about 15 years ago is when they moved into that. My mother was able to provide some of the seed money to see that that project got started. The Boys and Girls Club is located at 25 Union Street. My wife has been very involved in that for the last 6 or 7 years, and we've been able to participate with the Boys and Girls Club in helping to fund some of their programs. And that's another great organization that serves the whole community, the whole town of Westminster. Some of these organizations I'm mentioning have great leadership, great leaders. The Arts Council, Sandy Ox, has done a tremendous job. The Boys and Girls Club the last 3 years, Bonnie Mishulam, done a great job. At the hospital, it's a community board of directors. It's made up mostly of people from the community who are volunteers, but they have had great leadership out there for a generation, and that tradition of good leadership and good volunteerism and good community support is continuing. So all that's very gratifying, and that's had impact on me personally. Just to, it's one thing to have a business and to benefit from a business, and the community supports you and your business. With gratitude, we really are quite happy to be able to be in a position to help support some of these nonprofits and give back to the community, and see what both volunteer time and also monetary contributions have been able to do and help with in the community for some of these nonprofits. So when I was growing up, at first I think I wanted to be a fireman, and then wanted to be a truck driver because I wanted to see the world. And I thought, a truck driver, you'd be able to drive around and see the world. And then you're in middle school, high school, college, et cetera, and headed toward and went to dental school and wanted to be a dentist, and became a dentist, practiced, but it was one of those things where when my father died, I came to the point where I had to make a decision as to whether I was going to, because I felt like I wasn't really doing either career justice, either dentistry or working in the business, because trying to do everything, I didn't do everything as well as I wanted to, and I really had to make a decision one direction or another. So I decided to go stay with the family business and give up the dentistry. But in my last months of practicing dentistry in the fall of 1979, the benefit to me of dentistry was that's where I met my wife, because she was one of my last patients to walk in the door in the fall of 1979, and that's how we met, and we were subsequently married 2 years later. So I was quite happy with the years I spent in dentistry. Earlier, I was talking about what it was like growing up in Westminster and what life was like here growing up as a boy in the 1950s. And Route 140, what was called the bypass, was built in, I think, 1952, 1954, that period. Well, 1954, I was 6 years old. And later in the 50s, I would go fishing out of the community pond. And George's Twin Kiss had just been built, and we could fish on those hot summer afternoons at the community pond for sunfish and an occasional bass, and then on our bikes ride across Route 140 and go to George's Twin Kiss on the other side of the road and get root beer floats. And allowing a 10-year-old to do that today, even though the community pond is there and the Twin Kiss is there in essentially the same spot, even though it's called Plum Crazy Diner, but it has a Twin Kiss component. So what a difference it was 60 years ago when Westminster was rural and so much smaller and a much quieter, less busy place where 10-year-olds could essentially have the run of the town on their bicycle, as I did, as long as they were home for dinner by 6 o'clock. And parents apparently didn't worry as much. Today you just couldn't do that. So if there's something that that could be changed, that I could change, and I start thinking about the different things that affect quality of life in any community, and particularly our community, boy, you go education funding, you talk about traffic, you talk about health care, and the resources that are needed to support those things. And we talked earlier about nonprofits and the things, and the support that is needed to support those nonprofits, hospitals, Boys and Girls Clubs, fire protection. Oh, community media center. Absolutely. Boy, that would be great if somehow you were king and wave a magic wand and somehow create more funding for all the things, those things mentioned that you would like to fund. Having said that, however, and hard to prioritize which of those are most important. Public safety, traffic, important. School, education, very important. Healthcare, important. So I guess generally, if there was something that could be changed, it is more of a wish than a practical reality is more funding for the things I just mentioned. And where does it come from? Well, it comes from taxpayers, and taxpayers only have a certain amount, a limit to what they can support. So I think that's going to be the challenge in the future, how those things, how funding gets allocated to each of those things, and what the community, what constituents regard as most important. That will get settled out, but it won't come without a fair amount of discussion and probably some difficulty, because each of those things are competing needs, and And there are particular people who believe each one of those things, support each one of those things more than perhaps the others. As I look at the future and how things will progress over time, and will the community continue to flourish, and I'm pretty optimistic. I see vitality. I see financial strength. I see some growth, both from an economic development standpoint and from population. And I think although there's always issues, there's always problems, but I see us facing those problems. I'm particularly excited by the fiber optic project going on in the city of Westminster right now that's been spearheaded and implemented and started by the municipal government of Westminster, so the mayor and city council. Boy, that's a really exciting project to expand the pipeline of services. You get telephone, internet, and TV through fiber optic. It goes at a much faster speed, and the capacity is, I guess it's infinite. So it's, that's as an infrastructure project, that's pretty darn exciting. And we're one of the few communities in the nation, as I understand it, that has embarked on this kind of fiber optic project to, and that's pretty significant infrastructure. So anyway, I'm overall very optimistic about the future, and this is going to continue to be a great place to both raise a family, to live, to work, and with some of the economic development efforts going on, attracting businesses coming here, especially with that kind of infrastructure idea of fiber optic. Yeah, I see a pretty bright future for Carroll County. Nick, thank you for the opportunity for letting me share some views and some history and some personal information. It's been fun, and congratulations to the Community Media Center for having the vision to have something called the History Project. That's pretty neat, and it would be interesting for folks at some future time to look back and see what citizens thought about their community in the year 2015. Pretty neat. Thanks for doing it.
You're welcome. Thank you.